prioritizing these urgent issues, the government is focusing on constitutional amendments that serve no immediate purpose to the ordinary Zambian. On this basis, we, the people of Zambia, comprising the three church mother bodies, the Law Association of Zambia, civil society organizations, and all well-meaning citizens, firmly assert that any constitutional changes should be postponed until after the 2026 general elections. It is imperative that such reforms be undertaken free from political influence.
Civil society. And civil society includes political players such as the ones that are on this platform today. It further says, Zambians need a government which understands that holding public office is about service to the nation and not about reaping the personal benefit. Strong institutions of governance have a direct bearing on the development of a country. These institutions will ensure that no one is above the law. That's what Hakainde Hichilema promised, that in his governance no one will be above the law. He further said, in this regard, and here is the promise he made, in this regard, the UPND government commits to establish a durable constitutional order that will catalyze the political, economic, and social development of the country. B, complete the constitutional reform agenda anchored on a broad-based consensus among all Zambians. And further he says, revive the process of expanding the Bill of Rights to integrate economic, social, and cultural rights. These were the words on which Hakainde Hichilema was elected. He must hold himself accountable to this promise. And what we're seeing, as Trevor has said, is that he is now placing himself above the law. He has no framework whatsoever that he's following. He's not even talking to the people. He's going around at the showgrounds, at a meeting with youths and saying, I want youth to go to parliament. Do you want to go to parliament? And he expects youths to say no. Of course, the youths will say yes. And after that, he says, for you to go to parliament, you have to amend the constitution. Do you want me to amend the constitution? What answer do you expect from the youths? Of course, the answer is in the affirmative. And after that, he says, all Zambians have agreed. That's not broad-based consensus building. We want Hakainde Hichilema to ensure that he starts a process that is broad-based. And the process must actually not start with him. The process has to be started by the people. The least he could have done is to go and ask the people who are representatives of the 20 million Zambians in parliament. He hasn't been to parliament to ask parliamentarians whether they are ready to amend their constitution. So on that basis, and on what Trevor has said, and what my colleagues will say, we are united to reject any attempt by Hakainde Hichilema to mutilate our constitution. We cannot even refer to this as an amendment. This is just pure cowardly mutilation of our constitution, because an amendment has a process. And that process, if it's not followed, it means that you are just mutilating a document, mutilating the law of the land, and he must be stopped, because that's a criminal offense to mutilate the constitution of Zambia without following the due process.
Let me get to Mr. Ernest Mwansa, State Council, from the Zambia we want. Now, the government has justified constitutional amendments by citing the need to increase political representation for marginalized groups. You argue that existing laws already provide for this. How do you propose to strengthen the inclusion of these groups without amending the Constitution?
Thank you very much. And the first thing I would like to do is to show that the Constitution provides for all that President Hakainde Hichilema is talking about. First of all, you must bear in mind that it is the Constitution that must be followed, even when changing the Constitution itself. Okay, we haven't seen any activity that shows any effort to try to obey constitutional provisions for amendment of the Constitution. None at all. The first thing we have seen is simply a determination that we are going to change the constitution. But that's not even the point. The major point is that the president has been talking about representation, that marginalized people must be represented. You go to Article 259 of our constitution, what do you find? Exactly what he's saying. In the public service, the constitution or the law talks about gender equality, it talks about meritorious appointments, it talks about equitable representation of youths and persons with disability. So, in fact, it includes regional representation, that all regions must be represented. Have they obeyed that law? What is missing in the law that they want to change? It's not only that. The president himself has been given the power under Article 69 to make appointments to Parliament. And those appointments are intended to enhance the representation of special interest groups. It is meant to increase the gender representation in the National Assembly. Has that been fulfilled by him? Those are the questions we must ask if he wants to change. But even more importantly, if you go to Article 45 of the Constitution, you discover that the law wants us, even in the political parties, to take into account this need to ensure that all interest groups are taken into care of, that gender equity is undertaken, and so on and so forth. So, which law, or what is missing in the law that the UPND government wants to change? Let me even go further and say to you that in Article 59, we find the whole issue of how constituencies should be delimited. And one of the things you wonder about is, if, as we had said in an earlier press brief, that they should not question, that was our position, they should not question the information that comes from Zamstats, because that is the basis upon which decisions get made. But what has been done? That has been rejected. The report by Zamstat has been rejected, and the consequent result of that rejection is you cannot carry out delimitation on a faulty report coming from the only people who have the ability to tell us what the situation in the country looks like, how the disease that the UPND government is going to use in order to achieve what they are talking about. That clearly, for anyone who is honest and reasonable, raises suspicion that the intention is not to make the law better, but rather to use the law to do what they want to do, namely give advantage to themselves in the next elections. And that's why we are saying...
Just on that point, you suggested at the briefing that the UPND government is attempting to manipulate the constitution to serve its own political interests. Now, what specific provisions do you believe they intend to change for political gain, and how would these amendments affect Zambia's democratic governance?
Thank you very much. We have at least, I hope, shown that it is not intending to change the law so as to make it better, because the law provides for all that they want to do. And when we look at it from our perspective, all we can see is a desire to push into Parliament provisions of the law that will suit themselves. Let me give examples, therefore. We have heard this government talk about wanting, let me put it a better way. When you talk about changing the law, you must be changing it to better it, okay? But what have we noted from our colleagues? The intentions have nothing to do with this because the law provides for them. But we have also heard them talk about the issue of the Constitution having lacunae. Those lacunae have not been identified clearly, which they are going to be dealing with. They must be clearly specific about the lacunae they want to deal with. We've heard them complain about the Constitution having more than, giving room to more than 5 years in office. We've heard them say it themselves. So what do they want to do? Is it to change the 5-year term to 8, as they have mentioned, because the Constitution seems to give them that alternative? What do they want to do? What is it that is pushing them to a point where they want to change the Constitution? If the public statements are not, we feel that they are afraid that they can't go into the next election with a 50% +1 pass mark, because they know they cannot achieve it. We know,
right,
for a fact that they cannot. So they want to remove that, the majoritarian requirement, to something more reasonable and more comfortable. They will deny it publicly, but under their circles, that is an issue that is current. We feel that a constitutional process, as my colleagues who have gone before us have said, it should be so open to the public that everyone should know which provisions exactly are going to be changed. What are the tools? They leave room for speculation when they do not state exactly what they want to do. We are worried, for example, because we've heard that there are also overtures about changing this issue about the vice presidency. Okay? Meaning that the vice president should serve at the pleasure of the president. That should not be the case. We must have laws that ensure that those who are able to advise don't get disadvantaged in the way things are done. We are saying, don't go that way. But most importantly, why? And why is this government trying to begin constitutional changes at this late hour in the day, when they had from 2021 to date to make the changes? When, as Honorable Lubinda has already stated, they had made an undertaking during their campaigns to make those changes when they got into government. What has led to this delay? And why the sudden interest in changing the law?
I want to bring in Dr. Membe as well into this, President of the Socialist Party, with these amendments. Your views?
Mr. Hakainde Hichilema has not been sufficiently honest about the true reasons for his maneuvers to amend the Constitution. Initially, his main reason, or his initial reason, was seeking to amend the Constitution due to lacunas, or lacunae. Today, it is to increase the participation of women, young people, persons living with disabilities. And in addition, or as a by the way, to effect delimitation of constituencies that have become too vast geographically and whose populations have become too big and as such deserve to be subdivided. I hate liars. I hate manipulators. Manipulation has no substance. Manipulation is synonymous with opportunism. Manipulation is always distressing, but sometimes it is dangerous. And when you get it manifested in the head of the state, and it becomes the policy of a government, it is about time it should resolutely be put away. I cannot think of a more contemptible man. My power of imagination fails to bring into my mind's eye a more despicable man than the man who tries to manipulate, dream the whole population of his country, the whole population of his nation. The truth is, Mr. Hakainde Hichilema seeks and attempts to justify his push for constitutional amendments by citing the need to increase youth participation or representation, women's representation or participation, and persons living with disabilities, participation and representation in Parliament, and to effect the limitation of the constituencies. we reject this justification as misleading, mischievous, deceitful. Let me start with the issue of delimitation. There's no relationship between delimitation and constitutional amendment. The two exercises are entirely separate from each other. First, delimitation is provided for in Article 58 and Article 59 of the Constitution. The amendment of the Constitution is provided for under Article 79. Second, the power to carry out delimitation is given to the Electoral Commission of Zambia, while the power to amend the Constitution is given to the National Assembly, to Parliament. Delimitation can be conducted without amending the Constitution. According to Article 58, the purpose of delimitation is to review the names and boundaries of constituencies and wards. EC that can alter boundaries and can render the constituency be carried out every 10 years. Then the Constitution should also be amended every 10 years. Every 10 years when you hold your census, the Constitution must be amended. There is no relationship between the two. Let me end with the issue of increasing representation of women, youth, and people living with disabilities. The current Constitution, as stated by State Counsel Ernest Mwansa, already mandates the President to ensure equal representation of these groups in public appointments. The problem is not the Constitution. It is the government's failure to respect and implement its provisions. It's true. If it is true, the goal is to enhance the political participation of those marginalized groups. We propose a more effective and immediate alternative. We call upon all political parties in Zambia to ensure the enactment under Article 60 of the Constitution, which envisages that there will be subsidiary registration to make provisions for regulation of political parties. Article 62A says a political party shall promote the values and principles specified in the Constitution. To ensure the enactment of subsidiary registration to give effect to Part 5, representation of the people of the Constitution, which says in Article 45(1)(d), the electoral systems shall ensure gender equity in the National Assembly or Council. We implore the UPND to join this commitment if they are sincere about fostering diversity by enacting the act envisaged by Article 60. We stand ready to sign a formal accord and engage in discussions on the implementation of this proposal, which would immediately increase representation without subjecting the Constitution to partisan alterations, to partisan and unnecessary amendments. This would guarantee a significant increase in the number of women and young people in the National Assembly without the need to amend the Constitution. The issue about amending the Constitution is all lies, it's all manipulation. The limitation, increasing women's, young people, and people living with disabilities representation does not need the Constitution to be amended.
If you just tuned in, this is the Socialist Hour here on Hot 87.7. And on our panel today, we have Dr. Fred Membe, who you just heard from just now. He's the president of the Socialist Party. We also have Mr. Given Lubinda from the Tonse Alliance, Mr. Ernest Mwansa, State Council from the Zambia We Want, and also Bishop Trevor Mwamba, who is from UNIP. Now, Mr. Sakwiba Sikota is State Council from Uka. You've been very, very patient. We need to get to you to get your thoughts. There was a recent joint opposition press briefing. After that, the Zambia police summoned Dr. Fred Membe and warned political leaders against involving defense and security wings in political discussions, and then postponed the summon to a date to be communicated. What are your thoughts on the summon, its postponement, and that particular police warning?
Thank you very much for your question. I like your intro, where you said that I've shown a lot of patience, and of course patience is a virtue. I like it because we are seeing that this government is not showing any patience in terms of the United Masses and stand with the masses. That is not mutiny. It cannot be mutiny by any standard. Also, the fact that you're saying do not follow what politicians say but the Constitution, again, clearly is enshrined in our Constitution and must be protected at all costs. Again, don't you all agree that unconstitutional orders should not be followed? Don't we all agree that unconstitutional orders should not be followed? I think that it is very clear even at international law and even in our own laws that this concept of superior orders and that you can follow superior orders is not something that you can rely on as 100% defense if you do wrong. I'm sure you all remember the Nuremberg trials after the Second World War. That is when the people defending the Nazis attempted to bring forward this concept of superior orders being a defense to the atrocities that they had done, to the killing that they had been doing. And that was thrown out, that you cannot rely on superior orders as a defense. Even here locally, here in Zambia, the concept of superior orders is dealt with by our laws. If you look at Chapter 9 of the Zambian criminal law, the defense of obedience to superior orders applies to members of the military, paramilitary forces, police officers, and members of the protection services.
I'll kindly ask you to get closer to the microphone.
And members of the protection services. However, this defense is not absolute and can be overridden if the order is manifestly unlawful and unconstitutional. In other words, if a superior order is clearly illegal or unethical, the courts will not allow subordinates to use obedience of superiors' orders as a defense. There is also the same talked about in the Defense Act, which also does not give the people in the military the cover for superior orders. If you all remember, we had the famous Captain Solo coup trial, the so-called Captain Solo coup trial, which had Captain Stephen Lungu and Captain Chiti, who were the head of it. And they ordered people to do certain things, and those people followed the orders of Captain Chiti and Captain Solo. They came in court and put that up as their defense, that we were merely following the orders of Captain Solo, Captain Lungu, because he's I refer to him as Captain Solo, Captain Lungu and Captain Chiti. The court said no. The orders you were following were clearly unlawful, so you do not have that defense of superior orders. And they were convicted. So even now, those people in our military, in our police, and so on, should be as defense. This must be put into the curriculum for Lilai and also the military academies. It's a must. that must be put in there. So that is what I'd say with regards to the call out. It is unnecessary, totally unnecessary.
Dr. Membe, let me bring you in here. There appears to be an increasing trend of opposition leaders being summoned by law enforcement agencies. And of course, you an example of that's not the first time. Now, do you think these summons are legitimate legal procedures or potential attempts to suppress political dissent?
Maybe let me start with where State Council Sakwiba's quota ended. The army, the police, the intelligence services are there to save the people. And to save the people, they have to defend the Constitution. They have to abide by the Constitution. All their work should be conducted in accordance with the Constitution. Defending the people means defending the Constitution. If the people are up defending the Constitution, why should the police turn their tear gas on the people? Why should the soldiers turn their guns on the people who are defending what they are supposed to defend? And this is the clarion call we make, or we made on Saturday. And we repeat that clarion call to our men and women in uniform. Defend the Constitution with all that you have. You are a people's army, you are a people's police. Defend the Constitution, defend the people. Don't turn your guns, don't turn your tear gas, don't turn your short buttons on the people. You are there to save the people. You are not there to save tyranny. You are not there at the service of dictatorship. You are not there to save manipulators, liars. If orders are given to you that are unconstitutional, that are unlawful, the law criminal justice system possesses the power with a very high potential for abuse. And that power is often abused to administer the law in a discriminatory manner. They have used the law to persecute, to harass, to suppress, to oppress dissenting voices. Voices that oppose justly what they are doing. We have also seen them use the same criminal justice system to protect their own from being arrested and being prosecuted. We are seeing it every day in this country, especially more today. Those from the ruling party can do anything and they get away with it. When they come to attack you physically, if you defend yourself, you'll be arrested. You'll be arrested. And those who you are defending yourself from will not be arrested and be prosecuted. I'm a very good example of that. I'm in court today over such a situation. And many others are. So our criminal justice system is being abused, especially by this regime. We say to them, the exercise of power must be a constant practice of self-limitation and modesty. Power without breaks is dangerous. Power without limits is tyranny. The desire to get what you want at any cost leads to serious violations, to gross violations. And we see that in the current leadership of this country. They are unable to yield. They are unable to back down on anything that they want. Whatever they want, whatever their wishes must prevail over the wishes of the people, no matter how unrealistic they are. This is the way they are proceeding with the Constitution. This is the way they have proceeded with all other things. They are determined to get what they want at any cost. Even if it means that leading to the death of fellow citizens, they'll do it. They came to power with lives lost. We lost lives in the last election. The 2021 elections. Someone was killed. Kungo was killed in Solwezi. Nobody has been arrested to this very day. When they talk about people who have perished from political violence, they never mention Kungo. Simply because it doesn't belong to them. For you to matter and your life to matter, you must belong to them. If you don't, you have no life worth defending, worth protecting. You have no rights worth defending, worth protecting. Again, we make a clarion call to the Zambian people in all their diversities and complexities of every citizen. And defending the rights of every citizen means defending the Constitution.
And the current Minister of Local Government, in their debates after elections of 2016, also made reference to the fact that the Act number 2 of 2016 required amendment. In 2017, less than 6 months after elections, in January 2017, the Ministry of Justice announced the commencement of the constitution amendment process. And we gave the public 1 full year to make submissions. 1 full year. And we said to the people, make submissions orally, make submissions as groups, make submissions as individuals, make them through councils, make them through government ministries, make them directly to Parliament, make them through the Ministry of Justice. And there were submissions from more than 750 individuals. The Law Association of Zambia, the judiciary, all government ministries, provincial administration, cabinet office, Bank of Zambia, Auditor General's office, all commissioning the National Dialogue Bill was passed unanimously. And when I say unanimously, nobody, not even Jack Mwimbu, opposed it. Not even Cornelius Mwetwa opposed it. Everyone in Parliament approved that bill. And very quickly, on the 9th of April, His Excellency gave assent to that bill. It became Act number 1 of 2019. From the 24th of April to the 15th of May, 24th of April to 15th of May, we held the National Dialogue Forum with more than 400 delegates representing all entities that made submissions. Every individual who made submissions was invited to the NDF. Every entity that made submissions were invited to the NDF. And that was the NDF that my colleague referred to, the Mwanalushi, Professor Mwanalushi chaired NDF. And that was a free process, voluntary process. Nobody was paid money to participate. In June 2019, the Constitution Amendment Bill was published in a Gazette notice, number 660 of 2019. We did not hide. After the draft bill was made, it was published, it was put in the public domain for every citizen to interrogate. There was no comment from cabinet whatsoever. I want to make this clear. The NDF draft bill was carried from the NDF, and Ernest Mwansa was one of the leaders of the NDF. They approved the entry to Government Gazette without cabinet even looking at it. Because we said if cabinet looks at it, people might think we have changed things. Cabinet did not have anything to do with it. That was published in government notice number 660 of 2019. Now, on the 2nd of August 2019, Bill number 10 was presented to Parliament for first reading. And Speaker Matibini appointed a select committee of 15 members. And these colleagues of mine will tell you that it's very rare to have such a big committee to consider any bill. But Matibini was gracious enough to load it up with 15 members. 7 were from the Patriotic Front and 8 were from the opposition. That committee held 26 meetings over a period of 7 weeks. The ordinary time that it takes for any committee to consider a bill in Parliament is only 2 weeks, and only maximum of 10 meetings. In this particular case, they sat over 7 weeks and they had 26 meetings. 72 organizations participated in Parliament. They went to Parliament, 72 organizations, which were represented by 369 people. Now, add the 750 who made submissions, add the ones who went to the NDF, then on top of that, add the 369 who went and made submissions to the Committee of Parliament. On the 29th of October, 2020, now this is 4 years later, you can imagine, 4 long years later, a number of MPs debated in support. Not one debated against. Not one. Everyone debated in favor. And we went to vote. What happened on that day? Hakainde Hichilema deliberately locked up all UPND MPs at a more consensus building process than this process that Hakainde is using, where he's just going to a stadium, talking to women. I want women in Parliament. My foot. You want women in Parliament? You had an opportunity to nominate 8 members of Parliament. How many women did you nominate? How many youths did you nominate? How many disabled people did you nominate? And you want to hoodwink people and say, change the constitution so they can nominate? No. For heaven's sake, if you really were serious about increasing women participation in Parliament, at the time when all these people were applying to be adopted as members of Parliament for your party, in Mwansa there was a woman who applied. Why didn't you pick her? You instead picked Jack Mwimbo. In Ichoma there was a youth. Why did you pick Cornelius Mwetwa? If you wanted youths, why did you pick Muchima? If you really wanted youths, why did you allow Stumbeko Musokotwane to stand? You could have picked a woman instead of Stumbeko Musokotwane. You could have picked a youth instead of Stumbeko Musokotwane. And now you want to hoodwink Zambians and say, now all of a sudden, I'm so caring to youth. I'm so caring to women. Zambians are capable of seeing through this smoke screen. This is just icing the cake. We know what you are aiming at, and what you are aiming at is not in the interest of Zambians. But the Zambians will not allow you to enter into Parliament to go and amend the constitution to suit yourself while you are hoodwinking them, telling them about delimitation. Like my colleagues have said, there is no reason for you to be talking about delimitation now. You are using that to try and buy the support of members of Parliament. Now, I want to state to you that members of Parliament are not that gullible. They also know that you are doing this purely because there is something that is hidden that you want to take to Parliament, and you shall not be allowed.
Bishop, let me get to you. You have argued that the government is focusing on constitutional changes instead of addressing economic hardships such as high food prices, power outages, and a depreciating currency. In fact, when you, in your opening statements, you did allude to that. What immediate policy measures would you implement to alleviate the cost of living crisis if you were in power?
Thank you very much for your question. At the outset, I should underscore that the government in power and solemn duty to ensure the safety and security, prosperity and peace of the nation and people of Zambia. By focusing on illegal and immoral constitutional changes, it is evident that the government intends to deflect, and I repeat, deflect the attention of the nation away from its failed policies and measures to address immediate economic, financial, and environmental problems. This is very unpatriotic. And to what policy measures would we implement to alleviate the cost of living crisis if we were in power? Clearly, my answer to this hypothetical question will be dictated by the consensus outcome of national negotiations on the challenges facing our beloved nation. We would ensure that all remedial policy measures should seek to protect the vulnerable and marginalized members of our society, including women, youth, children, elderly, and persons with disabilities from adverse impacts of economic, social, financial, and other problems affecting our society. Above all, we would seek and foster an atmosphere of unity, true unity, the spirit of one Zambia, one nation on which our country was founded, solidarity, cooperation, and reconciliation among all parties. Now, to be specific on remedial policy measures, we would focus on such measures as job creation through providing an enabling environment for the growth of entrepreneurship, to strengthen the role of middle class and youth in national development. Youth are the most vibrant members of society. You can't have 80% of them outside the economy and expect to move forward. We would, as has been stated, in key decision-making roles, we would cut back on wastage of bloated civil service and subsidize meal and fuel prices. We would address urgently the issue of climate change and the related power outages resulting from low water supply for energy generation. That is through the adoption of alternative. We would strengthen the role of science and technology in national development by partnering with key international development agencies. We would revisit the incentive structure provided to FDI, this is foreign direct investment, in the mining sector for a more equitable and sustainable framework. Give priority to the support of agriculture, tourism, and infrastructure development. We would promote serious efforts of rural development and agricultural sector development to move away from heavy reliance on the mines and to improve the lives of the poor. This would mean having provincial economic agendas like we did under UNIP. So every province has a major economic driver. We would have government use its procurement power to revitalize manufacturing and generate jobs. For example, a policy that committed the Zambian government to consume only goods and services that have Zambian content would result in the creation of thousands of jobs. Now, it is widely discussed that cartels have monopolized fuel logistics, namely the Tazama pipeline, which UNIP built to reduce fuel transportation costs and improve energy security. We would put in place measures to allow the nation to benefit from the efficiencies of this infrastructure and reduce the price of fuel, which in turn would reduce transport costs. We would review the decision to shut down Indeni and whether it should be brought back to operation to further reduce fuel costs. If it turned out that it is cheaper to import the finished fuel product, we would convert Indeni into a biofuel blending plant and create economic incentives for Zambian farms to grow biofuel crops for blending with hydrocarbon fuels. The above measures would significantly reduce the transport costs of strictly Zambian businesses. Zambian businesses would therefore have access to cheap long-term funding. This way, the sovereign fund would spur domestic growth and lower international debt in a way that strengthens the kwacha. A stronger kwacha would reduce the cost of foreign inputs to Zambian businesses, which in turn would lower costs of production and cost of goods and services. Over time, the above measures would broadly reduce the cost of living, and coupled with lower corruption, would have greater prosperity flowing to the people's pockets and not cartels. So our focus would be on building a sustainable long-term path which supports our domestic economy and people while strengthening our resilience to external shocks. So, my dear brother, your question is very apt. Well, we can say that together, with God's help and moral, courageous leadership, what Zambia has, we can and shall overcome and prevail in all the challenges that continue to test our collective faith and resolve.
All right, that's Bishop Trevor Mwamba from UNIP. Let me get to you, State Council Ernest Mwansa from the Zambia We Want. What are some of the some policy measures you would implement to deal with the cost of living?
Thank you very much for...
I'll just ask that you be brief because we have to get to the phone lines and get people involved in our conversation.
Thank you very much for the question. Let me begin by highlighting the things that undermine economic development. Half the price that agrofuel is giving to the Zambian public. Now, that in itself speaks millions in terms of what will happen to the country when we are buying, or when we have the cost of fuel skyrocketing. There is nothing in the country that will not be affected and negatively impacted if the fuel costs are high. So we need to hear from government, is this true or not? Secondly, we need to hear from them. Are the reserve tanks in this country in the hands of agrofuel by contract, or has government sold them? Because if it is selling of those things, then it requires parliamentary approval. Has that been done? Those answers are important. And I'm giving this background for us to begin to understand some of the things that are impacting negatively on our economy. Fuel impacts negatively when the prices are up. Simple and easy. But not only that, you know, when you increase workforce in the public service, remember that the public service is not a production entity. It's a consumption entity. You do not pride yourself in increasing the number in the public service if your economy is struggling. You need to worry about increasing the number of employees in the industrial sectors, in the commercial sectors, so that you have a large reserve of money to be able to run the services in the public service effectively. The youth problem in this country is a time bomb waiting to explode. We need to be serious about finding what our young people must be doing on a daily basis. Now, I've highlighted this to show you where we are going wrong, because you can never solve a problem without understanding it. Okay? So, the future is basically about industrial development, commercial development, agricultural development. This is where money must be going. Improving this will improve the well-being of the entire country. And I think Bishop has highlighted some of these things.
Right.
There is need to put money where it matters.
Let me get back to Mr. Lubinda. You highlight contradictions among government officials regarding the status of the constitutional amendment process. Do you believe this inconsistency indicates a lack of coordination, or do you suspect a deliberate strategy to obscure the true intentions of the government?
Actually, this should create... 4 days later, the minister responsible for presenting the bill to Parliament said, no, did it yet. And we are now going to start consulting people. We shall be broad-based. We shall listen to the people before we come up with a draft bill. That's minister responsible for justice. On the 17th, then very next day, what happened? The former Minister of Justice, who is now Minister of Foreign Affairs, goes public and says, no, we don't even have to consult because we have done all the work There is no need for us to consult. We just have to proceed to Parliament and go and amend. The Minister of Information also comes around and says, no, we're only handling non-contentious issues because we want to save money. Now, taking a bill to Parliament which they have not even thought about because they are in a hurry to achieve that which they don't want to tell the Zambian people. And when Mwetwa says uncontentious articles in the Constitution, the whole Constitution is a constitution because it carries controversial, contentious issues. That's why it's called a constitution. Which article in the Constitution is not seen to be agreeing with what you are changing in their constitution? We can't allow, especially people who have shown us that even amongst themselves they don't agree. Then we give them the power to amend the constitution. We'll end up with a mess. Had they at least agreed, then at least would have had some confidence. But you go and give a team of cooks your food, and these cooks are telling you that this one is going to put salt, this one says no, I'll put sugar, this one says I'll put chili, and you still want to eat that meal, then you must be insane. As for me, I wouldn't eat a pie that has been baked by a team of bakers who have totally different approach to baking my pie. And I don't think that Zambians must allow that people who are in on how to amend the constitution should be given the authority to do so. They must be stopped.
Councillor Sikota, I'd like to get your thoughts on the contradictions there.
Thank you very much. I'd like to pick up from where my brother, President Lubinda, has left off. That you have obvious contradiction within UPND. And when you think that this person has come and claimed that we have done our consultation and we have built consensus, if even within their own ranks there appears to be no consensus, then clearly in the wider community there's no consensus. And to demonstrate that this is so, it is clear that he lied. The president lied when he came to the people and said, I have consulted, and after consulting, we have reached consensus. Because after he made that claim, Law Association of Zambia came up and said, we were not consulted. As a result, they've even had to go to court. 2,500 of them, maybe 2,500 of them are actually suing for having been left out of the process. So how can you boldly go out there and state that you have consulted when people even have to go to court to say we never had access? Let us be truthful. Let the president be truthful. You know, he's gotten himself a nickname. He should be trying to get away from that nickname. I think you all know. He's got the nickname of Vashi Promise. You know? Let him not go back to promising things that he cannot deliver, making lies, make people just be quiet and accept whatever is brought to them. And you cannot have a constitution which is going to be legitimate where you're frightening people from actually coming out and putting across what they genuinely feel. What I'd like to tell the Zambian people is that they should not be afraid. The government certainly is trying to scare them, but they should not be afraid. You know, what they should do is take a leaf from late Senator John Lewis, who was one of the civil rights campaigners alongside people like Martin Luther King, and eventually even became a senator in the US Senate. John Lewis stated that, and I quote, "In the quest of justice, equity, and human rights, never, ever be afraid to make some noise and get into good trouble." Zambian people need to be ready to make noise. They need to be ready to get into good trouble. All of us here are ready to get into good trouble in order for us to get justice, equity, human rights, and a proper this constitution and to get into good trouble.
All right. If you just tuned in, it is the Socialist Hour, an extended version of it. We'll be, closing at 11 hours. Our guests today, we have Dr. Fred Membe, who is president of the Socialist Party. We have Mr. Lubinda from the Tansi Alliance, Mr. Ernest Mwansa, State Council from the Zambia We Want. From Uka, Mr. Sakwiba, Sikota State Council, and also Bishop Trevor Mwamba from UNIP. I make mention that the Minister of Justice, Princess Kasune, is set to deliver a ministerial statement to Parliament this afternoon regarding the constitutional amendment provisions. In a Facebook post, Ms. Kasune says Minister of Justice, as Minister of Justice, she is dedicated to ensuring that the Constitution reflects the best interests of citizens. Ms. Kasune says citizens' engagement and contributions to this debate are essential in shaping the future of the nation. So I guess that's part of what we're doing this morning here. But do
president patonsa alliance muzambo tekati wina ngateka for 6 months paka 2025 for 55 years even if ni because kai party the party is for president patonsa alliance.
Okay, Musanje, thank you for your call. Let's pick up two more, then we'll allow our panelists to respond. 0974-870-877. Feel free to call us now. This is the Socialist Hour brought to you by the Socialist Party. We'd love to hear what you have to say. Call us now. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
We're good, thanks. How are you?
I'm fine. This is the Lubinda, the voice of Rwanda.
All right, Mulenga, please go ahead.
Hello, thank you.
But mulepanga president tarashiri ukwisha kuri cost of living hata index the man you pay bali kwa cost of living. That's why they are cash for work. That's why they are food for work. That's why parents ya mapasho waba kunafuta. That's why mule ayama nani kama CDF 6 million. CDF ano didn't take because abantu bambika tumaluno areas barenda chimpi atakuletona. Bantu sima consumer haya kwa ya chakula sana kupangwe chakula sana. Kuite mwabarusaka musaka mwakwate sima consumer tunaona kota bills. That's why neno abali kumafasiza mwabapere school. Mwayabula abaneno abali kumtika centro. Mwayabula abaneno abali sasa makunani kanyo. Malole. Mwabapere sima consumer school. Nishi mwaiteneno abarusaka. So ngari yaki ya limitation in the federal government 100% limitation in the price. Bantu mukaka bwata kali akano nokaja. That's why muna info no info ba given that mwabibomba mukabwata. Umuntu wa kutiyani kutimfa. Nguli kupambashe chakula sana kirefu limitation. In conclusion ndela ngachani amendment constitution which wenda tudangati. We mwanga namu nikuteka mkwete time yako limited. Kabie ni mulale abali ne abachana babesanga constitution ni bala chana limited.
Okay, Mulenga twatotera.
Thank you twatotera resapari omulabali.
All right, 0974-870-877. We'll pick up another one, and then our panelists can respond. Hello, good morning. Hello, good morning. I think that call dropped there. Feel free to call in now to the Socialist Hour. We have an extinguished panel here. We have Dr. Fred Membe from the Socialist Party, Mr. Sakwiba Sikota State Council from UKA, Bishop Trevor Mwamba from UNIP, Mr. Lubinda from Tansi, and Mr. Ernest Mwansa, State Council from the Zambia We Want. Give us a call now. We'd love to hear what you have to say. Any question or contribution? Hello, good morning.
Good morning, good morning.
Tivera, please go ahead. Hello? I think we may have lost that call, but let's deal with the two calls that well, there are three, but we got proper, thoughts from the two, from Sanjay and Mulenga. Please, I think, Mr. Lubinda, your name has come up quite a bit.
I'm not too sure whether you really want us to waste precious Socialist Hour to answer questions such as the one that was raised by Mr. Munsanje, because I think that Mr. Munsanje may not have even followed the discussion. Obviously, he was off the mark. He's talking about things that none of us spoke about. But just to say to Munsanje that, please, Munsanje, think more about the country, about yourself and your political affiliation. We are discussing a very important matter here. We're discussing the constitution of Zambia, and not about the propaganda that you use, the propaganda that Hakainde Hichilema used to win elections, or the false promises. One of my colleagues here spoke about the people who were killed, even on the day of voting, and yet UPND never make reference to them. So Munsanje, are you going to repent for the killing of Kungo before you ask me about killings that you think were caused by the PF? What about the people that you, UPND, a united opposition, if we're to make sure that we stop in destroying this country? It is not about individuals. A president is only one person and one office. What we're looking for is a formidable team, a team that is going to be consistent in governing this country. This is the reason why you see that we are gathered here, 5 different political organizations gathered to talk about the constitution, because this is above each one of us. There is not a single one of us here who thinks that their being president is more important than Zambia being governed by the right team, the right people. We are building a team, and when the time is right, we shall have a person that we shall front as our presidential candidate. But that person must be supported by a strong, formidable team. And it is our prayer that going ahead, we shall make sure that the opposition in Zambia is united, so that we go into the battlefield in 2026 united for the benefit of Zambians. Not only to dislodge Hakainde, that's not our idea. Our idea is that we must provide a better prepared team to lead Zambia out of this misery. I would also like to inform my friend who was talking about delimitation and talking about Kabwata and talking about Pambashe. He must first listen to what has been said. Colleagues have already stated here that the delimitation process does not require amending the constitution. But you should not also do it 13 months before elections. None of us would be against delimitation. As a matter of fact, the Patriotic Front in 2016 talked about delimitation, and the one who stopped delimitation exercise in 2016 was Jack Mwimbu. Jack stood in Parliament and said, please do not go through the delimitation process before we amend the constitution, in case we come up with a provision for proportional representation. If we come up with proportional representation, there may be no need for having constituencies, and therefore it's no need for us to do any delimitation. It was Jack Mwimbu's own argument. Now, for you to say, because we're going to have a delimitation, therefore you're
on one of the callers saying that the UPND government has done quite a bit to help in terms of how high the cost of living is doing. So, Dr. Membe, how do you think the UPND has performed in that light?
It's always good to look at statistics. The average national poverty today in this country stands at 60%. It has moved from 54%. Poverty in Lusaka today is 27%. It has moved from 20.2%. Poverty on the Copper Belt today is 35.0%. 9%, 8%. Average national poverty today stands at 60%. 60%. The poor, where I come from, has poverty levels of 82.6%. If that is not a serious problem, I don't know what to be more. There's talk about food for work, social cash transfer. Let's not try to turn weaknesses into virtues. 0.5%, according to the last statistics. At that rate of population growth rate, in less than 15 years, our population will double. It will be more than 21 million. It will be 40 million plus. Average urban population growth rate today stands at 4.5%. 4.5%. I think in these compounds of Lusaka today it's more than 4.5%. Where is the housing going to come from? From social cash transfer? From food for work? How will the water and situation be in 15 years? Water and sanitation for our people, how is it going to be in 15 years' time? If we are failing to feed 19.6 million people, how are we going to feed more than 40 million in less than 15 years' time? Social food for work. Create jobs, not food for work. Create so that people can take care of their lives in a better way. Again, let's not manipulate the poor. There's no future for them that they...
Forms of civic resistance.
Firstly, there's the issue of contradictions. We have heard so many contradictions from the leaders of our government today on this issue of amendment. Some of them even self-contradictory. They are contradicting themselves. Today they say this, tomorrow they say this. Another one says this today, that contradicts this and that. Ababemba batira akana kamoto etikali shempulu no musoli. When people start to contradict themselves like that, it's either they are lying. Amendment. We can protect all these marginalized sections of our society, or sectors of our society, or groups of our society, without amending the Constitution. Simply enacting laws that need to be enacted, acts of parliament that needs to be put in place. Some of them even start, for instance, changing policy by all. Let's not fall for the manipulation. Let's stand firm. Mr. Hichilema is not concerned about the welfare of our people. That's not what is driving his actions. The same thing they have done about fuel procurement, where they were making huge profits. Until when they realize elections are nearing, they are panicking over the fuel prices, using their own profits temporarily. They are all beneficiaries to this. It's not just the owners of that company. They were benefiting from this, to drop the fuel prices temporarily to cater for elections.